Okay, my name is Sue Trumbore. I'm in Jena, which is a small town in the middle of Germany. And my position here is as director of a Max Planck Institute for Biogeochemistry. And I'm here because of AGU Advances. So I'm an isotope biogeochemist, which means I used isotopes to trace elements like carbon through the global carbon cycle. And I love isotopes because they are extremely clever ways to get at problems you can't solve in other ways, to understand the pathways things take or how long it takes for carbon to move through systems. Well, I worked with, as a PhD student with Wally Broker, who was one of the original radiocarbon analysts, I guess, who measured radiocarbon in the oceans primarily, but almost everything else. And he was one of the first people to look at the how the distribution of radioisotopes produced by atmospheric weapons testing got distributed in the environment. So I learned to love C14 from Wally, and I've been working on it ever since. Somebody asked me, and I didn't have a good reason to say no. So actually, one of my colleagues at UCI was Bill Rieberg, who was one of the early editors of GBC. Also, Ralph Cicerone in the Department of Earth System Science at UCI, who was one of my mentors and hired me to be a faculty member there. He was, I think, an associate editor at GBC. So it was the journal that, you know, I published one of my first papers in, and I liked being involved in AGU. And Bill Rieberg sort of told me lots of stories about being an editor and the decisions you have to make, and how he really enjoyed the fact that people reviewing for AGU journals put such time and effort into their reviews, and I found that to be the case too. So it's a good way to also learn to write better papers if you edit them and see lots and lots of reviews. I was probably late. I can't remember now. When was that? I think I was an associate professor, and you know, it is one of the things that you're supposed to do to, you know, it's to put in your promotion file, but I don't think that was the reason I did it. It was more that I was asked. So, and yeah, I'm not good at saying no. So, I think being an associate editor is a good way to, as I said, learn to write better papers, because you see the review process from a little bit different angle. It's not your paper. You see how papers are improved by the review process, and the mysteries of publication are, you know, not so mysterious anymore. So I would recommend everybody to do it if they want to improve their paper writing in the long run. I think it's not that much work, especially as an associate editor. And it's also payback to your community. I was always taught that, you know, however many papers you submit, you should be reviewing twice as many, because that's the amount of work you are producing for other people. So, you know, it's part of the job. So I was increasingly frustrated with the fact that all of our best papers were going to journals like Nature, Science, PNAS that are not in our community. And why should our best work get published outside a society like AGU? And I was also, because, especially in Europe, the open access is a very, very important part of publishing. So the idea of an open access, high impact journal that could compete with Nature and all the Nature spawn journals was really appealing to me. I have a very broad background. At Lamont, I learned, everything from oceanography to paleoclimatology to atmospheric dynamics. And so and also as a undergrad, I was in geology. So I like the breadth of the papers that we see, and that was an attractive thing too. So, and, I was asked, and I'm not great at saying no. I think and also the idea of starting a new journal is, you don't get that opportunity too many times in your life. So it was a challenge that was really attractive. What AGU, there is GRL, which is, has been always the high impact journal for AGU, and, it's the publishing juggernaut, right? It's where, a lot of the papers published by AGU are published, and it has an excellent reputation. But the papers are kind of short. You had to have the right length story to submit to GRL, and sometimes, longer stories, as well as kind of these commentaries that explain why that research is important. That's where I feel AGU Advances can, help to fill a little bit of a gap that maybe explains our interdisciplinary science to another field, trying to get people to understand why something in your field is so important. So yeah, for the broader community, I think what I hope AGU Advances will become is a sort of a showcase for your best work, for the work that you feel will have broad impact, and either impact that's of a societal nature that, needs to get more broadly understood by the public or by even your own scientific peers. And also just to have an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary place where people can go to read about the latest, greatest thing in seismology if you're a biogeochemist like me, or understand something new about Saturn's rings that you might never have thought about. So that's, to me, that was always the reason to look at science or nature, but they were mostly, papers on topics that were very far. There are only a few earth science papers in each one of those issues. So the idea would be to have something that's a little bit more across the earth and space sciences, that's written, that are papers that are written with enough space so they can really explain why this result is really important, and advancing the science in a way that's interesting to everybody. So from here in Europe, most of the funding agencies are requiring us to publish in open access journals and have open, fair data policies. And I think AGU has jumped on the fair data, but not totally on the open access yet. But I think it's inevitable, especially here in the Max Planck Society, it's easy for us to publish open access because the society pays for a lot of the fees. But really, it's just taking the burden from the library subscription to the pay to publish kind of your individual paper. What's important is that it not leave people behind who don't have financial resources to pay for the fees, but I feel like that's being built into most people's conceptions of how this will go in the future. So I see open access as the future. And so I'm very happy to, have a flagship open access journal in AGU. So in launching Advances, I think the biggest challenge was probably trying to figure out with the other editors how we were going to handle papers. So we've taken the sort of approach that science has a review editorial board. So we've taken that approach where we, have several editors review a paper initially to see if we want to send it out for review, and then the review process goes on from there. We always knew we wanted to be a very selective journal, and I think one of the challenges is trying to sort of go beyond your own very narrow field of discipline to trying to see things that fit between disciplines, or where no one person's totally the expert. So that's been a challenge. So our very first paper was on the observation by citizen scientists of these new auroral phenomenon called the dunes. And I never thought our first paper would have to do with what we call the ignorosphere, up above the stratosphere. But it was a really well-written paper. It involved citizen science. It had beautiful visuals, and it got a lot of attention. And so I'm kind of happy that that was the first paper that we published. Oh, okay. So one of the ones that I really liked was a geomorphology on Mars paper that was about how long it takes for the alluvial fans that we see on Mars to form, and sort of using geomorphic concepts that originated on Earth and applying them to another planet with a different gravitational field. I thought that was kind of cool, and something that reinvigorated my interest in geomorphology and planets. So we're still figuring out a little bit what the journal is. One of our goals is to provide the kind of buzz around a paper that you would get with a nature or science paper. So lots of social media, highlights from the editors on each paper, trying to highlight work that's published in other journals as well through the digest. And we were also starting a new group of editorials that address the issues of structural racism in the Earth and Space Sciences. And I'm looking forward to the voices that we're going to hear. So, what we hope to do is bring a little more diverse voices into the people who are writing the viewpoints and the and adding content in addition to enhancing diversity of the editorial board and hopefully our reviewer and publishing pool of authors. I mean, I feel like for any journal, the most important thing is integrity of the whole process. The fact that as an editor, you are the referee between reviewers and authors. So you make sure that the communications are collegial and constructive, and not that I've found that is a huge problem with AGU journals. By and large, it's not an issue, but occasionally questions are raised, and it's important to deal with them with as much integrity as you can muster. Yeah. So in 10 years, my vision, my dream for Advances is that it is the journal that people want to submit their most impactful research, their highest impact papers. And that'll be the first journal you think of sending your results to. If you're in the Earth and Space Sciences, you'll send it to Advances as opposed to any other outlet. That's my dream. So I feel like the whole publishing enterprise is changing. very rapidly, and you know, who knows what the future is going to bring in terms of whether you read a journal or, you know, a lot of it's just archive papers that somehow get a review stamp of approval at the end. I still think that the individual journals are useful because the editorial boards can be the best mechanism for finding the right reviewers for a paper. And I do believe the peer review process improves what we publish. So I don't think we can have integrity in scientific publishing or in getting our science out there without some form of review involved. I do think it's a really, the next decade or two is going to really change the way we publish papers. You can already see it with the archive possibilities where you can, you know, upload your paper while it's in the review process and get comments on it, public comments on it, as well as the reviews. And we'll have to see how it develops. Okay. So one of my pieces of advice would be to avoid the minimum publishable unit. So the quantity of your papers is not as important as, you know, writing one really good paper. One of the things I dislike about the PhD system here in Germany, where I am, is that it's based on, you know, writing a certain number of papers and then getting your PhD, and it produces a lot of sort of minimum publishable units just to get the right number of papers. So to me, the quality is so much better than the quantity. And, you know, you can see it in the citation rates of the sort of, you know, papers that not many people are going to read because they're very specific and very focused on one small problem. And I think if we all published a little bit less, but put more in each paper, that would be a relief to the reviewers, it would be a relief to the people writing the papers, but then also that has to be recognized in the way that we evaluate research for promotion. So it should be about what we've done, not how many papers we've published. Well, so far, my favorite thing about the journal, we're so young. We haven't published that many papers yet. So far, my favorite thing has been the interactions with all the editors and learning, you know, seeing their critiques of the papers that come in and learning about the very different fields.